Welcome everybody. My name is Kim Gaji-Alexander. I'm one of the directors at Bethesda Green. I run our Be Green Living program, and I also run our Environmental Leaders program. And the Environmental Leaders program is a school year-long internship where seniors typically come in and they work at Bethesda Green. They learn about what it means to work in an office and what it means to work in the sustainable business industry and to work in a nonprofit. And then in the springtime, they complete spring conservation projects. And as everybody knows, COVID-19 happened, and unfortunately some of our spring conservation projects got changed a little bit due to the current working conditions of all of our students having to work at home. But our students have put together a wonderful presentation of sustainability topics and things that they're interested in, and they're excited to present them to you today. So that's a little bit about the program. What I'd like to do is share my screen right now so that you can actually see some of the presenters. This is on our Bethesda Green website, and you can see we have all of our environmental leaders listed. Here we go. All of our environmental leaders listed and a little bit about what they're passionate about and what school they attended. So we have Mary Claire Wright, Arjun, Nida, Eve, and Anjali. And at this time, I'd like to thank Chesapeake Bay Trust, who funded our program. We receive one of their mini education grants, and we've received it for a few years now, so we thank them for all of the funding that they've contributed to our programming. So a couple of rules for our webinar. I'm going to stop sharing. There we go. A couple of rules for our webinar. I'm going to keep all the participants muted unless you're a presenter and you're speaking, and they will be sharing their screens so that you could see basically a presentation about their project and then also their product that they produced. If you could please type questions into the chat box, and I will read the questions to the presenters when they're done presenting. That way we can keep everything moving in a timely manner. Each student will have 15 minutes to present and question and answers. When the students are presenting, we have two students who are going to have materials that are going to be linked to the Bethesda Green website, and Marisa will kindly put them in when the students are presenting so you can actually see the student's work product. And then, as I mentioned, we have 15 minutes for each student. If we do have some extra time at the end, we can hold more of an open question and answer session if we have time, but I'm not sure if we will, but we'll find out. Okay. So let's get started. So our first presenter today is Anjali, and Anjali, I'll ask you to share your screen and take it away and make sure to unmute yourself. Here, Anjali, I'll unmute you and you can share your screen. Okay. Anjali, do you want us to come back to you? Okay, you're talking, but I can't hear you. I keep hitting the unmute button. Maybe you still have yourself muted.
I think she said she's.
Hi, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with my mouse. I can't see it. So I'm kind of clicking blindly right now.
Oh, okay.
I don't know why that's happening. I'm really sorry. I'm gonna try just shutting my laptop and opening it, and hopefully it doesn't close the meeting. Is that okay?
Okay, so what we'll do is we will switch to Arjun, and then you can rejoin when you're ready, okay?
Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Okay, Arjun, you're up.
Sure. Okay. Hi, everybody.
Who are you? Tell us a little bit about you.
I'm Arjun. I'm one of the environmental leaders on this program. I'm from Walt Whitman High School, and Ms. Marfatsos was the one who's my coordinator, and I'd like to thank her and Kim for allowing me to present today. So let's get started. All right, let's go. So my project is the recycling hoax. I'm just gonna try and elaborate a little bit more on it. So when I was traveling all over the world, I used to go travel to Malaysia, Indonesia, and my own home country of India, and I would see these large stacks of plastic burning, and it always made me wonder why it was possible that third world countries could be in this shape while first world countries could be far better off with these systems in place. And when I came to the US, I started to kind of research what the recycling system was in the United States, and I kind of uncovered something that I don't think a lot of people know, and I think it's a little bit of a lie. So let's just get into it. The original project was supposed to be like a whole culmination of things, and I was supposed to write an article alongside trying to like go into personally how the recycling system worked. And my whole plan was to go visit a recycling plant and get an idea of what was truly happening and what was actually being recycled, so I could at least have a thesis and have something to corroborate it with. And then I was also supposed to get in touch with several conservancies and take part in trying to help clean up waterways in our surroundings, just so I could have a little bit more experience in trying to combat the issue. So the timeline, it started in January, and from there it was project research for the majority of Jan, February, and March. I was looking at news articles and trying to find statistics and where trash is accumulated locally. And I was trying to get locations for the photo shoot, which I was trying to do, and try to present all these photos that I took in these cleanups and try to have a major presentation done. And then March and April, I was trying to design graphics to display in my article, which I did if you guys looked at it. There's a few pictures which I drew by myself. And then there's a final project which was basically just making the slides presentation and putting everything together, which took up most of April and May. So unfortunately, as time got closer, something unexpected happened, and it made us all change our plans for the project. And COVID-19 kind of deeply impacted us all on a large scale, and my project was definitely a part of that. So with everything kind of being shut down, I was kind of forced to solely focus on writing the article and prove my point that the recycling system was kind of lying to us. I had a lot of partners originally, and there were a few locations that I was trying to get in touch with, which included the Rock Creek Conservancy, the Anacostia River Keepers, and the Montgomery Green team. So the article was essentially a walkthrough of how the recycling system came to start in America in the 1970s. And as it progressed, I started detailing like the key players in the whole process, which included the EPA, China, and just the identification system, which was really complicated. So here I have a video. It's linked to a very famous commercial. I think maybe if you guys saw it, it's the Crying Indian. Basically, it's one of the commercials that just kind of jump-started the whole movement. And it was this famous picture of this crying Native American man. And that was the Keep America Beautiful movement. So let me can you guys see this? Just a thumbs up if you guys can.
Yes, we can. Can't really hear it, Arjun.
So it's just like it's just a bunch of music, but basically the visual is the key part, where there's like a man washing up on this completely corroded beach.
Some people have a deep, abiding respect for the natural beauty that was once this country, and some people don't. People start pollution. People can stop it.
So that was it. There was basically this Native American man who was he sheds one tear as a sign of like what has happened to this country and the world. And I think it was at that point in time a very like moving, and it made a lot of people kind of rethink what they were doing. So the history, it was originally created in the 1950s after World War II. The petrochemical industry was taking off and was responsible for the creation of plastic. And I think we all know that petroleum is a main component in plastic. And along with that and a bunch of additives, they created these bite-sized particles called resin, which were small pellets of plastic. So when the green movement began, people were demanding a clean and environmentally friendly method of getting rid of plastic waste. And the movement was supported by many major associations who were actually major contaminators and decided like their ad propaganda would turn the blame on the consumers rather than themselves. So it was more of like whose fault it was. Was it the producers' fault who were creating all this waste, or the people who were littering and basically not keeping our surroundings clean? And the government had to step in and decide to design a recycling system that would benefit the public. So the lie was that they created 7 categories of plastic identification codes. And out of those 7 categories, only 3 were actually recyclable. So types 1, 2, and 4 were actually being bought by recyclers and being reused. The rest of the categories were being dumped into landfills or ending up in oceans or waterways. So people would have found out sooner if it wasn't for China accounting for taking the majority of the world's plastic. And it was only until 2017 when China banned the import of foreign plastic that the world started to take notice of the fact that a lot of this plastic was ending up just outside and being burnt, which is what I also saw personally. These categories 3, 5, 6, and 7 were not actually being recycled, but rather being burnt for cheap fuel, which was just crude, kind of not really clean types of gasoline, but it was taking a toll on China's air quality and its people. So when China banned foreign imports, the world was scrambling to kind of look for places to take the load off this influx. And a lot of these countries, such as Malaysia, Philippines, and Indonesia, kind of these main hubs in Southeast Asia, became overwhelmed, and they started kind of taking all this plastic until they couldn't anymore, and they decided to kind of pawn it off to other countries such as India, Vietnam, and Thailand. So this process is continuing to this day. So how much longer can this continue till the system gets exhausted? So there's a few solutions which I think would help. The Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act aims to kind of get rid of single-use plastics completely. And if this works in the US, we would no longer be playing as big of a part in such an exponentially growing problem. And it would incentivize other countries to join in as well. For normal people like us, I think, since we individually can't do anything to kind of combat this issue, I would kind of encourage them to support the cause and help attend the cleanups and advocating for better laws, because if we don't do something, we're just continuing to be part of that problem. So yes, that was it. Thank you.
Thanks, Arjun. Okay, we have about 5 minutes for questions. So if you could please type your question into the chat box. Thank you, Kelly, for putting that link to the history of the commercial. It's pretty interesting.
I'm happy to answer any
So
questions.
Arjun, what do you think is the most important thing individuals can do in their daily lives to make a difference?
So some of the things that you should really be keen on trying to do is not try to throw things that you think are recyclable or not, which is called wish cycling, which I think a lot of us talk about and know. It's just kind of saying that just because you think it's recyclable doesn't really mean it's recyclable. And the fact that now we know that a lot of things which were supposed to be recyclable are also not being recycled, wish cycling is even more kind of hoping for something that's not going to happen.
Okay, How come only 3 types are recycled?
So those 3 types, those are the only 3 types that are actually being bought by recyclers and being reused. But the rest of the types are not actually truly recyclable. So there's no reason for recyclers to actually buy it if they're not making profit, because recycling is a for-profit business.
Okay. And do you have any specific recommendations as to how to advocate for better recycling laws?
So I think just based off of what I have so far, if we get rid of single-use plastics, then we'll be able to at least have the major part of what the contamination is, a huge percentage, which is what. So we buy one thing and then we use it for a small period of time, and then it suddenly becomes trash. If we were to get rid of that major part, we would have much less plastic, which would not need to be even used or even recycled in that matter, because people wouldn't have single-use plastics at all.
Okay, Kelly, I'm going to combine your questions. So do you happen to know if Montgomery County has an end buyer for all kinds of plastic, or how much they ship out of state?
So I don't think Montgomery County has an end buyer for all of the plastic. They do have buyers for types 1 and 2. Type 4 is barely recyclable. So really, we're only talking about 2 types of categories. And even for those, I think because of the pandemic now, they don't have buyers who are taking it internationally. So this plastic is still accumulating to this day locally now.
Okay. Other than COVID-19, what were some of the other challenges you faced while researching and writing your article, and how did you overcome them?
So besides just COVID-19, I think a huge problem was trying to have a specific idea of how to make it look like I wasn't just kind of spewing this conspiracy, rather than having kind of true claims and actual facts. Because what I'm trying to say is that it's kind of misleading that the government is not saying that all 7 types of plastic, which go into the recycling bin, so you put them into your big blue bin and your small blue bin, they're not all actually recyclable. So trying to prove that I wasn't just kind of just throwing a bunch of claims at people and not really backing it up was the major part of the challenge, I think.
And Adam says, excellent and thoughtful presentation. Bravo, Arjun.
Adam.
I have a quick question for you, Arjun. So the countries that you visited, which one was the most polluted that you visited?
Sadly, I guess I would say that it's probably my home country of India, just because just there's so many people, and now I think more than ever, a lot of the international plastic, at least I think before COVID, was being imported to India because China was just closing off its borders. So I think slowly but surely India was becoming like the next major superpower, and with that, I think comes all these kind of pollution problems.
And which part of India are you from, north or south?
I'm from Mumbai.
Okay. So everybody has a better understanding. Any other questions for Arjun? All right. Thank you, Arjun.
Thank you.
You can turn on your fan now. You can mute yourself, turn on your fan, and we are going to switch over to Anjali.
Hi.
So Anjali, if you could share your screen and take yourself off mute. Perfect. Whenever you're ready.
Okay, so my project was repurposing as a solution to textile waste. The purpose of my project was to repurpose excess / unsold thrift store cotton t-shirts into blankets and pillows. And originally the goal was to donate them to a homeless or women's shelter, but right now that's kind of a problem that I'll address later. And my project addresses the issues of textile waste, and more specifically the influx in donations to thrift stores recently. In recent years, there's been many people donating their clothes to donation sites, namely thrift stores. And a lot of these stores just end up throwing their clothes away because they only have a certain capacity. in their stores. I chose this project because I have a big passion for climate change and climate activism, and textile waste contributes heavily to climate change, and especially in recent years with the rise of fast fashion. And another reason why I chose this project specifically is because I watched an episode of Patriot Act by Hassan Minhaj, and it's called The Ugly Truths of Fast Fashion. And he brought up some really good points. One being that one Salvation Army center in New York creates 18 tons of unwanted clothes every 3 days. So all of these clothes are thrown away. And I thought that was very surprising. I had no idea. And I really think that more people should be aware of this. I have a clip from a video. It's only like 10 seconds.
Is there audio, Anjali?
Was the audio not working?
No. It's okay. We have subtitles. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what the video said? Anjali, are you frozen? Okay.
The joy of Zoom.
I know. Okay.
Hi.
So as we get Anjali back, we're going to move on to Mary Claire. So Mary Claire, if you could unmute yourself and start sharing your screen, that would be wonderful.
Sorry.
Anjali's back.
Oh, Anjali's back. Okay. All right, Anjali.
Hi, sorry. I think the video kind of took over the connection.
That's okay.
So I'll just not do that.
All right, share your screen again, please, and we'll
Okay.
continue on.
Okay, so the main problems with contributing to textile waste are fast fashion, which contributes to reduced clothing life cycles, and ultimately that leads to a ton of textile waste. One fast fact is that one garbage truck of clothes are burned or landfilled every second, which is crazy. I think the environment deserves better than that. The definition of fast fashion is an approach to the design, creation, and marketing of clothing fashions that emphasizes making fashion trends quickly and cheaply available to consumers. And basically this means that stores design trendy clothes that are supposed to go out of trend, out of style quickly, so that people will buy more, and the clothes are cheap, so it's very appealing to more and more people every year. But this has a really bad effect on the environment. It causes a ton of textile waste, and it's the second largest polluter in the world after oil. And this is why I think consumers have a great responsibility in how they should pay attention to how they're buying their clothes. The life cycle of a clothing garment basically just means that from conception to design to creating the product to selling it to its disposal, that's the whole life cycle of a clothing garment. And this graph shows the fads, and that is basically fast fashion. And you can see that it kind of has a very short life cycle. And the average consumer now buys 400% more clothing than 20 years ago. And most of these garments are only worn a few times. And the amount of times each piece of clothing is worn decreases every year. And then this contributes to a ton of textile waste. There is high waste generation and little clothing recycling. You'd be surprised at how little our clothes actually get recycled. And the fashion industry is actually responsible for 10% of global annual carbon emissions, which is more than all international flights and maritime shipping combined. And so this clearly has an effect on climate change because of its carbon emissions. And I really believe that consumers have a responsibility to be more conscious of how they're buying their clothes. I think the main ways they can help are reducing the amount of clothes you buy, making sure you're wearing, like being conscious of how often you're wearing your clothes, so wearing your clothes more often. And just by doing that, you're reducing your own personal carbon footprint. Same with buying secondhand clothes instead of new clothes. And then the next thing you can do is reuse your clothing. And then after that is recycling. So I think that people should just, instead of immediately jumping to donating their clothes as the first option, there are other steps you can take beforehand. And the one thing that I did for my project is repurposing clothes into different items. So I created a blanket and a few pillows, and I used the scraps to create a few mats, or a mat, but I will create more mats. And then lastly, you can donate to thrift stores because they have too many clothes, and a lot of them don't get recycled. A lot of them just get thrown away. And then this is my project timeline. From December to January, that was pretty much just brainstorming and scoping the project, so refining how I would actually do the project. And then February to a little bit of March was reaching out to different thrift stores and collecting materials. And then mid-March, we had the stay-at-home order, so implementation kind of was pushed a little bit. But March until now was implementing the project, and that included learning how to sew and actually sewing the project together. These were my basic funding requests and my materials, and the main ones that I would say, the most important ones, were the stabilizers, which helped me sew. It prevents the t-shirts from curling while sewing, and then other sewing materials. The total cost was $89. My partners and contacts were Bethesda Green, St. Alma's Church Opportunity Shop, and Urban Thrift. And I had more contacts before COVID-19, before the stay-at-home order, but ultimately I wasn't able to use these contacts. I wasn't able to pick up clothes. And for Blue Planet Scuba in DC, I had neoprene wetsuits donated to me, but I was going to use them for the blanket to make it thicker and more insulated. But I don't have access to a larger, more industrial sewing machine. I would have before, but I don't at home. And so my barriers to implementation of my project were first contacting thrift stores. I compiled a long list of thrift stores and ultimately only ended up picking up clothes from 2, which ended up working fine. But in the beginning, it was kind of a long process. I had to drive to each thrift store, and for one of them, the communication was not the best. I had to drive into DC a few times. I ultimately did not get clothes from this thrift store because of COVID-19, but it ended up being okay. COVID-19 was obviously a barrier. I kind of like stay motivated when I'm busy, and since I wasn't busy for the first few weeks of the stay-at-home order, it kind of like decreased my motivation for the project, but then I kind of got back into it. And since this was my first sewing project, it kind of got me excited because I was learning a new thing. And another barrier was donating the final product, because as of right now, I don't really have anywhere to donate it to because COVID-19 is kind of preventing homeless and women's shelters from accepting certain donations. They're only accepting very specific donations. And then another barrier that I faced was trying to go zero waste and deciding what to do with the scraps. And I ultimately decided to use the scraps in order to go zero waste. And I was unable to finish the project completely because it was kind of pushed back a few weeks. But this just means like I will finish it later. I have the front of the blanket, but I don't have the back of it yet. These were my measures of success. I used 35 t-shirts in total for 1 blanket and 4 pillows. I didn't fully complete the product, but I have a final product, and I completed the research, and it is almost zero waste. And this is a photo of me crocheting a mat with t-shirt yarn I made from some of the extra t-shirts. I'm not going to show the video because it's just I am so worried that it'll shut down again.
2 minutes, Anjali.
Okay, this is the process of my project. I cut the t-shirts, ironed on the stabilizers, and I sewed it together. And then these are the final products. I have 1 blanket here and then 4 pillows. And then for now, I'm gonna store them at Bethesda Green and donate them later. And then I'm working with my contact at DC Scuba to figure out how to recycle the neoprene wetsuits that were donated. And finally, I believe that, what I learned is that textile waste is an issue just like any other environmental issue that doesn't have a single solution, but I think people can do their individual parts to help with this issue. And I think that like individual actions can go a long way. And these are my references. Thank you.
Awesome. So your first question is, do you think fast fashion might change due to COVID-19?
I'm not sure. I think it could go 2 ways. I think people could start buying online more, which could lead to people not really thinking about how their actions impact the environment because they're more focused on getting clothes on like quickly. But it could also go another way because there are other platforms to buy secondhand clothes. One being Depop. It's not very well known, I don't think, but there are other ways to avoid fast fashion.
Awesome. Okay, Stu, thanks for joining us. Are there good estimates of carbon emissions from discarded clothes?
I know that it takes the fashion industry contributes to 10% of global carbon emissions, but I don't know specifically that.
All right, next, Adam says, very good, Anjali. Have you thought about starting a nonprofit organization to repurpose old clothes into items like the blankets for shelters, or a for-profit business to take people's old clothes and turn them into something new?
I haven't, but I think that's a really good idea. I think that's a cool idea. And ultimately, I wanted to donate all of these products so that they weren't just sitting in my room. And I hopefully will eventually get to do that, but right now I'm not sure. It's kind of unclear.
Okay. Last question. Did you consider making masks out of the materials?
I did. I haven't really thought about like what to do with the scraps much more than what I did before, but I did think about it after like COVID-19 started picking up, and I might do that.
All right, excellent job. Any other final questions for Anjali? All right, thank you, Anjali. You can mute yourself.
Thank you.
And our next presenter is Mary Claire.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Okay, so this is my presentation. 10 ways to slow down climate change and protect the environment. So my background, so for the first part of the semester in the internship, I worked with Kim as part of the county's initiative to draft a climate action plan bill to lower the amount of carbon emissions. The county put together a group of 5 separate work groups, and their names are down below, that all consisted of like experts or different community members on the separate work groups, and they were all related to the environment somehow. And so Bethesda Green was in the transportation technical work group, and we were specifically in the walkable, bikeable communities subsection of that work group. And so throughout the fall, I sat in on meetings for the work group, and listening to them made me incredibly passionate about contributing to the county's effort, and made me even more interested in like transportation and how that affects the environment and climate change. So for my initial project, I wanted to create a digital transportation map to display and highlight all the different types of public transportation or environmentally friendly transportation with different arrival times and route for each. I wanted to display the transportation map on TVs in hallways of Bethesda Chevy Chase High School. And so the purpose of this was to increase awareness of public transportation, encourage students to use these alternatives instead of driving. So down below, it would look like the left-hand picture. You click on that, you'd see that first, and then you type in your destination, and it gave you a list of all different types of transportation in the ETA and the route with a picture on the side. And so I wanted the map to be at BCC because I wanted to like encourage students and people who I was like closely or like could relate to, because a lot of students I feel like aren't really aware of a lot of public transportation. They just automatically like jump in their car and go somewhere. So yeah. So this is my timeline. Brainstorming, I knew that I wanted to do something related to transportation, but I didn't know what yet. And then I finally figured it out. And then in February, I started meeting with partners and designing what I wanted the map to look like. And then in March, the coronavirus outbreak occurred and kind of put my plans on hold. And I realized ultimately like I couldn't continue with that idea, so I had to come up with a new one. And I started developing that new idea, and then in May I completed it. So these are the funding materials and partners for my initial idea. Funding from Bethesda Green to download the software to display the map correctly, and then potentially buying a new TV if the TVs at Bethesda Green or at BCC weren't able to display or have touchscreen or have like a touchscreen mode. And the materials obviously were the code in the computer and the TV used to make the program and have it display correctly. And then the partners were my principal at BCC and the BCC tech administrator. I talked with him to know about like the ins and outs and the logistics of getting the map displayed on the TV. So then in March, coronavirus occurred, and we weren't going to school anymore, and we didn't have access to the TVs, and there wasn't that much incentive to take public transportation at the time, so I realized I needed to start all over. So kind of back to the first semester, I realized listening to all these meetings that most of the changes that we had drafted in the bill had to be completed or done by like local or county or national governments, and were huge institutional changes that would take a lot of time and adaptation, and that like most citizens couldn't really do a lot in their like everyday lives accommodate these changes, and it was like a huge jump that would take a lot of time. So I started to think of ways that every individual citizen could do to change their habits, even if it had not as big as an impact as the big institutional changes to slow down climate change. So for my project, I decided to write an article with a list of activities every citizen could do and to minimize our impact on the environment. I began researching and decided to narrow it down to 10 simple changes to our daily behaviors and practices. And so I realized that even though our actions aren't as big as huge corporations and governments, we definitely do have some power, and we can feel kind of helpful or hopeful to know that what little impact we have is heading in the right direction, and it has a good impact on the environment. So the next few slides are a summary of my 10 things that I wrote about in the article. Obviously in the article there's more information, more facts and figures, but here is a small summary of each. So the first one is going zero waste and using the 5 R's. So refuse, reduce, reuse, rot, and recycle. Just in general, buying less stuff is always a good option. We should say no to single-use plastics, and just really think about our purchases before we actually go through with them. Do we really need them, or are we just going to throw them away in the next month? Reusing items and repurposing them for something else. Like Anjali was saying with clothing, like you can always turn your items into something else afterwards, even if you don't need it for that original use anymore. And then setting up a composting system is under the rotting part, and recycling as well. So number 2, I felt like this needed its own number in the article. Avoiding plastic. Just like Arjun said, they take hundreds of years to degrade, and they end up in oceans and landfills, and they just create a lot of pollution, and they emit a lot of greenhouse gases, and they're overall like not good for the environment. So a few ways to avoid plastics is that we can bring our own reusable shopping bags. We can stop buying bottled water and mugs to coffee shops. Shops like Starbucks and Pete's and many others sell their own mugs, so that you can just come back and refill your mug or cup instead of just buying a new one every single time. Saying no to straws at restaurants, and then rethinking food storage. Like when you pack a lunch, try to use containers or glass instead of disposable plastic bags that are only single use. And then number 3 was trying to upcycle clothing. Just like Anjali said, fast fashion is not a good practice, and a lot of consumers are doing it even though they don't even realize. So there are some alternatives to fast fashion, like buying clothes from thrift stores, garage sales, online peer-to-peer buying and selling apps like Depop or Poshmark, and then trading stores. So some examples in the Bethesda area are Mocha Thrift and Red's Trading, right down the street from Bethesda Green. And then number 4 is changing light bulbs in your homes. They do have higher initial costs, but they can save energy and money in the long run. A study by the UN said that they could prevent a total of 16 billion or 16 billion tons of carbon added to the atmosphere over the next 25 years. And so there are two main types that are definitely more energy efficient. So there's CFLs, compact fluorescent lights, and they have a spiral design and they're pretty well known. They've been around for a couple of years and they typically last about 10,000 hours. And they're about 75% more efficient than incandescent bulbs. And then LEDs use less energy than CFLs, and then they save about 80% more energy than incandescent light bulbs. So, and then number 5 is going paperless. Just basically, whenever you can, if you have the option to, try to convert all of your documents to online. It won't make you lose things as easily, and it helps to reduce clutter, and it saves trees, because a lot of time we just like buy paper or use paper and then it just ends up getting thrown away and not recycled. So we could opt out of junk mail lists, pay bills online, and then switch to online subscriptions. Like instead of having newspapers and magazines delivered to your house, pay for online subscriptions. Usually it's also a cheaper option, so that's also a good advantage of it. And then just digitalize your documents as well. Okay, and then number 6, a lot of people don't know this, but only about 2% of the water on Earth is fresh water, so that's not a lot. And then even then, only about 1% humans can actually access, because most of it is underground or in glaciers. So ways to turn off your water and reduce your usage are just to take shorter showers, and then don't leave the water running while brushing your teeth or washing dishes or anything like that. When you're doing laundry, did I freeze up?
Mary Claire? Mary Claire, can you hear us?
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Do you have headphones that you could use? Oh, you're moving.
Laggy. So.
Okay, yeah, we can hear you. Yep, I can hear you. You're kind of.
It's really slow.
Oh wait, there you go.
So I'll try to talk.
Yeah, there you go. Now we can hear you.
Oh wait, there you go.
Okay.
Okay. So like I was saying, don't leave the water running, and then don't flush trash or anything down the toilet as a means to get rid of it. One flush can waste up to 5 to 7 gallons of water, and that can add up throughout the day. If you flush the toilet like 5 times, that's already 35 gallons of water that you've wasted. So number 7 is supporting local farming and going to farmers markets as often as you can. They keep local farmers in business and can help rebuild local food economies. At farmers markets, there's usually a wider variety of delicious and healthy food. And another benefit is that you get to know where your food comes from because it's very local. And then you can help lessen the global carbon footprint by taking away profits from big companies that usually ship their food across the country or even other continents. because a lot of the transportation used in doing that contributes to a lot of the carbon emissions.
1 minute warning.
Okay, so then there are a couple of farmers markets in Bethesda listed below. Number 8 is composting. There's a lot of food waste, and that contributes to a lot of food waste and food insecurity and climate change. Composting benefits the environment by recycling organic resources while conserving landfill space. And then one of the well-known composting services in the DMV area is Compost Crew, and they will help you like have a drop-off and pickup spot and can help you get rid of your waste efficiently. Okay. And then number 9 is adopting a plant-based diet. Don't have to completely cut out meat, but a small shift can go a long way. Just eating steak or meat like once every 3 weeks instead of once a week, because livestock farming does contribute about 15% of global greenhouse gas emissions. It's incredibly harmful to the environment, and it causes a lot of pollution, uses massive amounts of water. And then in the Bethesda area, there are a bunch of restaurants that do serve healthy and delicious like plant-based meals. Okay, number 10. So just using public transportation when you can, when you're riding or when you're going to work. Try to bike, walk, or use the metro or ride a bus before you just jump in your car. Look if there are routes that'll take you right to your work instead of just defaulting to driving a car. Montgomery County and the DC area both have extensive metro and bus routes that you can take whenever you want, or that you can take wherever you want to go, and it can definitely accommodate like scheduling. So yeah. Okay, so then measures of success. There's a completed article published on Bethesda Green's website. It is right there. After this project, I became more informed about changes I can make to my daily habits, and I will definitely be partaking in those afterwards. And then at some point, I would like to publish it in the school newspaper if they put out another issue. So conclusion, I'm very happy and proud with the outcome, even with all the original setbacks and barriers, like the coronavirus. It was a very interesting project, and I learned a lot in the process. Additionally, this past year with Bethesda Green has been such a rewarding and an enjoyable experience. Thank you, Kim.
It's 4 o'clock.
Oh, my computer does that, sorry.
Okay.
And then next year, I will be studying civil engineering at Virginia Tech and hope to minor in green engineering to build sustainable infrastructure in cities. And that's it.
Wonderful. Okay, first question. Do you know what percentage of BCC students use public transportation?
No, I do not. We use mostly, I know because they put out like a survey in the beginning of the year that a lot of students do try to use ride-on buses, but a lot of students don't really use the metro or metro buses as much, or Uber or anything like that. But since ride-on is free for students, like we do try to utilize that as much as we can.
Okay. Were you able to convince your family to make any changes in their consumption or habits?
Yes, we've decided that we're going to start composting.
Yay! How did you pick which tips to include in the article, and what was your research process like?
So I really wanted to do easy, simple changes that don't take a lot of time and effort, because I know that people are not in the best mindset right now. And after just researching and finding a lot of other similar articles and other facts and figures and research that other companies put out, I compiled a list and tried to make it the most 10 important things.
Okay. What do you think the biggest barrier is to people adopting your recommendation? Education, cost, convenience, or something else?
Probably convenience, like public transportation or upcycling clothing, they might not have any of the resources that can help you make these actions easier nearby, or they might be out of their way, and so that would inconvenience people from completing these usually simple tasks.
Wonderful. Could your school or others adopt some of these practices?
Yes, I think BCC should definitely adopt a composting, and we did try it before coronavirus happened, I think, and then maybe also using only CFLs or LEDs in classrooms and in the hallways.
Okay. What do you think is the best way to educate people on a larger scale about these solutions?
Probably like researching more and maybe teaching it in school, just little activities that we can do to make people more aware of the different possibilities.
Okay. And Nita wants you to know that you did a really great job adapting the barriers you faced, and I 100% agree. The fact that you had to change your project in March is amazing. So kudos to you for that. All right, thank you, Mary Claire. So our next presenter, you can mute yourself. Our next presenter is going to be Eve. So Eve, you can start your screen share and unmute yourself.
Okay. So first off, can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So as Kim said, my name is Eve London, and I am a senior. I attended BCC, so the Bethesda Chase High School, and I have been Environmental Leader Academy intern for the whole year. And my project is an environmental themed board game, and I called it Branches and Smog. Okay, so my inspiration for this project is a few things. One of them being my interest in sustainable business and B Corps. During my junior year, I spent a lot of time researching for one of my classes of sustainable businesses and B Corps and that whole process, and I was really interested in it, and I ended up writing an entire essay about that and why companies choose to become B Corp. So I thought that for my project, I might want to consider doing something around B Corps. Another is that I'm very interested in waste reduction and compost. As Mary Claire said about BCC adopting composting, I was someone that took a leading role in trying to get that to happen at BCC with a few other leaders. And COVID did mess that up a little bit, but hopefully next year will be all good. And that was something I was considering for this project. And then also I have an interest in environmental education and also the game of Sequence, which you'll see a picture of. My mom and I play, I think, weekly. And we were sitting down for a game in the midst of brainstorming this project. And I thought, what if there was an environmental themed board game that kids could play? So that's how I got to my game, which is the handmade version of Branches and Smog. So to the left is the board game. It is 50 squares and it looks it's modeled after Chutes and Ladders, which is why the name might sound a little familiar. To the right, the game comes with a yellow direction sheet and a blue definition sheet. I will touch on those a little bit later, but this is what the game would come with and you need to play. So my board game from start to finish, I was drafting while we were still in the office how many squares I want to have, where the ladders and branches would go, but I really started putting the whole game together when we were home during quarantine. And so on the far left image, that was the first thing I did. It's very faint, my pencil marking, but I actually do have like little squiggly lines to show where I wanted the smogs to be, the smog slides and the ladders and all of my little facts. The middle is the first kind of making it actually the board game it was going to become, which was adding in the yellow and green paper and pictures I printed. And then the last is the image you saw before, the final product. So the materials that I used to create the board game and what you'd need to play. I used the repurposed board game, which from a game called Imagine If I had at my house, and it broke and I wasn't using this game. No one in my family was, so I decided to just tape it back together and use that board game structure for my game, and I just put paper on top of it. A lot of colored paper was used, colored pencils and markers, a printer was necessary, and a die, or using an online die, which I have a picture of, is suitable for the game. And some of the game pieces. I want to make this as much of a environmentally focused game as it could be. So I wasn't going to supply people with game pieces. I wanted to say, hey, go in your house. I'm sure you have something that you can use, like a eraser cap, a penny, or a paperclip. So some of the key features of the board game are smog slides and branch ladders. Those are the two images to the far right, and those are the all natural, organic, green, 100%. Those are all catchy slogans for greenwashing, which if you land on square 14, you would go all the way down to 6, and you would be sorry you're a victim of greenwashing. And then much like that, but positive for the ladders, I have an environmental idea that someone came up in square 2, but then that translated into them winning later on in square 8 the Goldman Environmental Prize. I have little online pictures that I printed out, like the animals to show species and biodiversity. I also have these two images of the green paper and the yellow paper. These two are very important because the green on the board game is positive environmental messages, and the yellow is negative environmental messages. So this is the directions that come with the game. I looked online for chutes and ladders, like their directions, and I modeled mine after that. And that will come with the game. So the goal is really you just have to get to square 50 by following like the rules of kind of like the road or the rules of the board game. And then this is the definition page. And I created a definition page because I wanted to make sure that this would be a game that 5th graders could use and they wouldn't get troubled by hearing B Corp, or they wouldn't get confused if they saw Rachel Carson. Maybe they don't know who that is at that point, or they don't know what a B Corp is. So what I did is I made a definition page. So if they got to a square that they were learning a new term on, they could refer to the definition page and have a clearer understanding of what they were learning about. So this is a video of the gameplay. I'm gonna get to it. We'll see if this works out. Okay. 1 second.
I got a 5 and my sister got a 2. I will go first. On my
1 sec.
first roll.
This is about 1.5 minutes.
To play Branches and Smog, the first step is to have both players roll the dice to see who gets the highest number. The person that gets the highest number goes first. I got a 5 and my sister got a 2. I will go first. On my first roll, I got a 2. I will move my game piece 2 squares. I'll go up the ladder and I will land on square 8. Now, my sister will roll the dice for her first turn. She gets a 3. She'll move her piece to the 3rd square and she lands on a yellow message. Yellow messages are negative. On my next turn, I roll a 6, which means that I move my piece 6 squares. I land on a square that has a smog slide, so I move my game piece down to square 6. My sister rolls the dice again, and she gets a 1. She moves her piece 1 square. She lands on a green message. Green messages are positive environmental messages. The game continues until one of us gets to square 50.
So my original timeline, yeah, my sister was in the background. I was playing for her. But my original timeline was that in mid-December, I selected my project and I was starting the researching process. And I was also picking from a list of of my environmental interests, which ones I want to include in the game. Mid-March, I started designing the board game. End of March, I decided I was going to be finishing the board game and emailing teachers at local elementary schools like North Chevy Chase and Rock Creek Forest. And then April, I was going to bring the game to the school to play with the students. However, once COVID-19 hit, I had to readjust my timeline for how my project would be conducted. So mid-December, all of that stayed the same. It was really in March that I started to adapt what my plan would be. So I designed my handmade board game, and that took about all of March and a little bit of April. And that's also in April where I found out, I think maybe making an online version of my game that people can print and have a downloadable version at their home during quarantine could be a suitable option for this time. So that's what I decided to do. So this is the online version of Branches and Smog. It's on two 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper that you can print. I decided that I was only going to make it in black and white. I wasn't going to make it in color so that it would, one, give kids an opportunity to color it in themselves, and then also so that no one would be missing out if they didn't have a colored printer. So the materials for the online game, I needed my laptop. I primarily used Illustrator and Photoshop to make the game. A printer is necessary, a die or an online die, either works, and then game pieces just like the handmade game. So for advertising the game, I'm going to be making posts on Bethesda Green's Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram feeds that will have a link to the downloadable version of the game. It's also going to be posted on Bethesda Green's website so that, again, people will be able to get the link to print it out at their house. And then also I plan on sharing the link to my neighborhood listserv. Rosemary Hills Elementary School is right up the street from my house. So in my neighborhood, I have a plethora of young students that I'm sure would really like to have something to do during quarantine. And I thought that this could be definitely a fun thing that they would like to be a part of and play. So some of the challenges I faced is the COVID-19 schedule change, and Anjali spoke to this a little bit, where this motivation happened, where it's, we were off of school and kind of getting back on a new normal schedule for, getting schoolwork done, getting internship work done. But ultimately I was able to get on a normal, just a normal schedule and keep going with the project. Originally, I was going to make this board game with a professional company called Game Genius, because I knew Peter Williams, who is a game designer who came in to talk to my anthropology class. And unfortunately, he wanted to meet with me in person because of the complexity of the website he uses to create his games. And when we planned to do that, it was about the end of March. And by that point, it was not feasible to meet in person. Another challenge was, of course, I could not bring the games to the school to play, but overall, the online version was able to make up for this loss. So the measures of success are being able to complete both of the projects, both a handmade and an online version. Another future success for this project will be potentially having Bethesda Green run analytics on the game on their website. So how many people download the game, how many people interact with it, how many people leave comments. Another one is how many schools, classes, and students interact with the game. And again, this is for future, maybe next year if this can get into schools. And then also a really big one is understandability and efficacy. I think that really why I made the definition page and why I want to make, a complex board game that had maybe new terms and new pictures and everything was to make sure that it was challenging, but it was also getting people to, look at the definition, see if they could learn something new, but I want to make sure I did it in a way that people could understand no matter how old they were. And then my future plans is I really want to bring all of my skills and my new knowledge and passion that I have, that I've learned from this game, to Dickinson College, and that's where I'll be attending. And Dickinson has a really strong environmental program that they're really passionate about, and I think that this game will be really applauded and used, and could definitely be back in my life in the next few years. Another one is that my board game, the handmade version, will stay at Bethesda Green. And also next year, I'm going to send the online link of the version to schools, and maybe I could work with my contact, Peter Williams, to maybe make it a game like he's made in the past, where I could bring a handmade version to schools as well. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Eve. All right. Let's see. Well done. Did you get a sense that your sister liked playing the game? Did she get some educational, some environmental education out of it?
I think she did, yes. When she played, it was really fun because she didn't actually know one of the terms. She didn't know what 0 Hour was, which is a student-run climate activist group. So she went to the definition page and she read a little bit about it. So it was definitely a learning experience for her.
Okay. Great targeting 5th graders. Have you thought about targeting high schoolers, or having the game serve as a review for a class like APES?
Absolutely. 5th graders was more of an example. I really want to integrate this into as many grade levels as I can. I think that I made the game, I think I made the understanding level really able to go into high school for an APES class, or to be in 3rd graders classes.
Okay, another comment that they love the game, extremely artistic and unique. It looks like such a fun game. If you continue to distribute it, do you think you would ever create new versions with different environmental facts from the original ones?
That's really interesting. I think that I would consider doing that, maybe making different themed ones. This one was kind of all of my ideas and interests combined in one, but I think maybe I could do like all fast fashion, or I could do, all compost, something like that.
Excellent. Love games to teach children was the last comment. So thank you very much, Eve. We appreciate it. You can put yourself on mute. And last but certainly not least is Nida. So Nida, you can go ahead and you can unmute yourself and you can share your presentation.
Okay.
Share your screen. Oh, wait, Eve's sharing. There you go. Stop sharing, Eve. There we go.
Okay.
Perfect. Okay, Nida.
Okay, here is share screen. Okay, thank you for joining me. My name is Nida Khan, and today I will be presenting the project that I worked on during my time as an intern at Bethesda Green. The title is Transporters, A Brief Introduction and Tour of Sustainable Cities. Ooh. Okay, so why did I choose this for my project? Well, when I was younger, my sister and I had this cardboard poster that we used to draw different buildings on, and like roads and parks, and that amalgamated into a city. And that was kind of a sign for me when I was younger that I did have an interest in how cities were formed. And that was reiterated and reaffirmed by when I traveled and moved to different cities, seeing how the way those were constructed really informed the way that the residents interacted with it and how it provided for people, like the differences in Bethesda and Karachi, for example. And so for my project, I really wanted to explore and learn more about cities, how they are built and what makes them sustainable, as well as how sustainability is implemented in a city and how it can be implemented and where it is implemented. So I will take you on a little detour just to explain the title. So the reason that I call this Transporters is because of Star Trek, because in the fictional universe of Star Trek, transporters are the technology that is used to beam down the crew members of the Enterprise onto the new worlds that they're going to like help and explore. And so I wanted to have that same kind of interaction present in my project. I wanted to allow whoever was interacting with it to feel transported and immersed in the world of sustainable cities. So just a cute little tidbit for you. So what is a sustainable city? So for my project, I defined a sustainable city as one that can provide for its residents' needs long-term without harming the surrounding environment. And due to the expansive nature of this project, or of this subject, I found a common group of aspects that cities focus on, and that the ways that sustainable cities focus on that makes them sustainable. So this was water, such as making sure that we are using our water efficiently and not polluting it. As Mary Claire said, we have a limited amount on this planet and we need to make sure we're making the most of it. Energy, how can we use technology to further implement sustainable energy sources that we have already found, and how can we kind of expand that and bring it almost to replace or hopefully help with integrating it more into our system. Transport, how is a city and how can a city be constructed to encourage more green methods of transport, such as biking and walking? And also, what are other technologies that we can use to maybe lessen our reliance on gas-fueled vehicles? Green buildings. So for green buildings, I like to think of them as like sustainable cities as a microcosm in a way. They're like little mini sustainable cities that need to have all those aspects of a city, meaning such as using resources efficiently, being built in an appealing and comforting and pleasant way, being able to meet its residents' needs, and ultimately being able to stand the test of time. Resilience. This we are experiencing, especially now because of the pandemic that is happening. This is how a city can handle the shocks and stress, unexpected shocks and stresses, such as natural disasters, or as we are seeing the COVID-19 pandemic, and how a city can be constructed in a certain way and how it is built to see how we can handle that and bounce back better. There's pollution management. So sustainable cities are always aware of the ways that they impact the environment around them. And one way that they do so is in seeing if a certain industry or technology is impacting the environment in a harmful way. How can you stop that? You know, such as ensuring that gases that are not the best for the environment are not released from a factory, and using some kind of technology to avoid that. And lastly but not least is environmental equity, which is more of a social aspect, but it is just as important as the rest of these. Environmental equity is I feel as if it's two ideas. It's not only giving people the right to decide what happens to their cities and their neighborhoods, but also ensuring that a benefit of a sustainable city is spread across the whole city and not just designated in small areas while the rest are suffering. You know, I mean, it's making sure that all of the residents in a city, regardless of wealth, gender, race, or anything, have the same opportunities to clean air, fresh water, good buildings, good transport, this whole thing. So I went through a journey with this project, and it was a experience, and it changed a lot. But my final iteration, the objective I decided to settle on was to create a brief introduction to sustainable cities and include a visual and virtual experience of some kind. And I wanted to target this to 5th graders because I feel as if that's an age where inspiring kids can kind of happen, and I really thought that just introducing it young would be a good idea. So what my project ended up being was it consists of a webpage that explains not only the different aspects of the city, as well as how why sustainable cities focus on it, and also what technologies they use when they focus on it. But I also created a virtual tour of 360 photographs that show this technology in use and actually where it's being implemented in the real world. So this is located on Bethesda Green's website, or it will be located on Bethesda Green's website and on Google Expedition, and the launch date is March 21st, 2020. My project timeline. So January consisted mainly of research. What did I want to include in the information of my project? What constitutes a sustainable city? How did I want to break my information down so that it could be digestible? February was looking at the different mediums and technology that I would focus on and use to make my project. March had to do with the design process. What form do I want to take? What form do I want my project to take? April was refining and editing and finalizing. And then May was finishing it and launching it and advertising it to kind of spread awareness. So I was exposed to a great many different materials throughout this project that were super interesting to learn about and that I definitely think I'll be using further on. These were things like Unity, which is a 3D game design engine. This is Blender, which is a 3D modeling, which is separate, but it's used in tandem with engines like Unity. Then there's GIMP, which is a Photoshop-like software, WordPress for creating websites, GitHub, which is basically the Library of Alexandria for tech people. It's just like a giant reservoir of information, of codes and instructions and frameworks for building, open source frameworks for building projects on your laptop. And I think it's great. And also with A-Frame, which is a separate framework that allows somebody to build an AR experience or VR experience actually within a web browser in HTML. So there were some barriers for implementing my project. I was I was new to the realm of virtual reality, augmented reality, and virtual tours. And so that learning how to use these technologies definitely did have a learning curve with it. And it definitely was something that I struggled with. And it did impact my final project's result. However, I was able to tap into places like GitHub, which had such a great amount of knowledge that I could use to help me. And so that eventually was, put into place. And then another barrier that I experienced was the actual information I was presenting, which is the give and take of sustainable technology. So when I was researching all these different alternatives to what we're currently doing that sustainable cities used to do, I did find that they themselves had notable conflicts and cons. And I felt conflicted myself because I felt like, would it be possible for me to present this as a solution if it causes problems itself? But when I considered it and when I weighed it out and when I did talk to Ms. Kim about it, thank you, I decided that you should present it with the cons so as to not be biased. However, compared to how we're going now, these cons are not the biggest price we can pay. What we're doing now is the biggest price we can pay. And so in the long term, they would be better. So the measures of success was basically just having a functional website and virtual tour and user engagement, meaning just knowing that people are being exposed to it and seeing it and perhaps interacting with it. So these are just a few pictures from my website of posters that I created. And sorry for the quality, but this is kind of what the website looks like. It's a bit, fragmented, but it's basically in this form. And so these are actually different pictures of technology that I included in my project. So this first one on your bottom left is a green roof in Japan. And what it does is it basically collects stormwater and avoids stormwater pollution, but it also just looks gorgeous and it makes me want to live in this building, even though it's a prefectural hall. The image right next to that is an image of a flow cell battery plant. And flow cell batteries are a current type of technology that holds a lot of promise for storing large amounts of energy and for being able to last a long time. They have been said to be able to last at least 22 years with little to no degradation in their quality of storing energy, which I thought was amazing. And then the photo on the top is of a VR tour from an waste to energy plant of Covanta, which is a waste to energy plant. Basically, this was to show pollution management, because when they burn their waste to create energy, what they do is that they burn the fire in a very specific way so as to avoid any sort of so as to avoid certain gases being produced, like nitrogen oxide. They make it very long and then add oxygen on the top, which in turn creates that effect. And then lastly, which is actually my favorite, is the PRT pods at London's Heathrow Airport. So these pods are driverless electrical pods that ferry passengers between parking lots and terminals, and they avoid the use of gas vehicles and kind of streamline the public transport at the airport. So I originally wanted to do an AR app, and when I first thought of doing it, this is kind of how I felt. However, March came around and this was a more accurate representation of how I felt with my project. Yes, there's a dog. It's just like, that's kind of how I felt more so. But I'm not gonna give up on it. I really, like something was sparked within me. I really was interested in the realm of AR and the possibilities that it produces, and I want to keep going and eventually create an app or some sort of augmented reality experience to illustrate the different technologies a sustainable city could use. An avenue I am currently pursuing is Google Expeditions, where I'm currently hosting the VR tour. And the image that you see is of a AR tour created by one of Google Expeditions' partners, Avita Systems, and hopefully mine would look similar to this. And lastly, a great big thank you to all the wonderful people at Bethesda Green, Miss Kim for putting up with me, Marisa for being like a wealth of information, like just the best things. My fellow interns for their amazing work, and the Chesapeake Bay Trust for allowing this to happen. For me. Yes, okay, I'm just gonna let that sentence finish. Anyways, thank you so much. And do I stop sharing? Okay, stop share. Got it.
Okay, Nida, a few questions people have for you is, do you see yourself studying more AR in college, more about AR in college?
Definitely. I mean, so UMD has a whole virtual reality AR lab that they have. So definitely I would be interested in exploring that with my future.
Okay. Based on the case studies you examined, do you think cities could grow economically while building sustainability into their city operations?
So definitely. I mean, the main purpose of having a sustainable city is not just, it's to meet the needs of people whilst also being environmentally viable. I mean, a lot of it is efficiency, which means less money in certain, like less money for air, for heating and cooling and that sort of thing. And also, in other ways, it probably wouldn't, I don't think it could slow down economical development, and it could actually help grow a city, because once it is a place that is conducive of good living standards, more people will come there and join there, and it'll grow economically. I hope that's a good enough answer. I'm going to read more about it actually, but yeah.
What do you think is the biggest barrier to more cities becoming sustainable?
I think currently it's that a lot of the infrastructure, this is one of the reasons I wanted to kind of visualize the technology that we're using. A lot of people don't really have any hope in it, I feel, at the moment. And also the thing with cities is that it is a ages-long process. Rome was not built in a day, and neither will be a sustainable city. But I think the belief is that it'll be a huge project to take on. In fact, it could be taken slowly and incrementally and built up to make an entire city sustainable. Hope that's also a good answer. Okay.
All right. Did you have any discussions with your science or tech departments at your school to help with 3D tech?
No. So.
You want to explain why?
I didn't know how to get in contact with, because at my university we don't have an AR department. We have something with AutoCAD, but I wasn't really using AutoCAD. So I definitely, if I could go back and like kind of tell my 6-month younger self to do something and be to contact my professors, definitely.
Got it. And then one comment, I think the quality of life in the cities you envision would be much improved. So
Yes,
bravo.
definitely.
Okay. Thank you all to our wonderful environmental leaders. I appreciate everybody for participating today. I would just like to, give a shout out again to Chesapeake Bay Trust for funding the Environmental Leaders Program. And if you wanted more information about our environmental leaders, it's on the Bethesda Green website under Meet Our Leaders. You can see all the leaders here. All of the links to their website, to the things that are posted on the Bethesda Green website are posted in the chat box, and then we will also post them again in the follow-up email that we send out. Does anybody have any final questions or thoughts for the environmental leaders before we all move on to our beautiful Friday evenings?
Just to say thank you, everybody. You all did a really great job. That was super impressive, and I learned a ton, so I'm really happy. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Kelly. He says, great work, everybody. Thank you. Patty Simonton, she says, you all did a wonderful job. So thank you. Congrats to all my environmental leaders. I really want to give you a shout out for navigating the COVID-19 project world. It was difficult and a new experience all at the same time. And I want to give everybody mad kudos for working on all of their projects and for actually completing all of their projects in a timely manner. Stu says, congrats, makes me hopeful for the future. And it has been wonderful working with all of you since September. It is always my honor and my pleasure to work with high school seniors and as they graduate and go on to hopefully a wonderful summer and hopefully not too much indoor time for the summer. So thank you everybody for participating today, and I hope you have a wonderful Friday afternoon. Thank you all.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wash your hands.